All right, so I know a lot of you have been asking us to do a deep dive into religion, specifically the origins of religion. So that's what we're doing. We're going
Way back.
way back to the Paleolithic
Yeah.
and Mesolithic periods. And we found this incredible research from One, the
Yeah.
beginning of religion. And it really digs deep, like you said, way back, looking at possible practices and belief systems. So get ready to rethink those old images of cavemen worshiping fire,
Right.
and get ready for some surprises when it comes to those old cave bear cults everybody always talks about.
It really does challenge some common assumptions. Our understanding of early humans and their capacity for religion has really changed a lot recently.
So let's jump right in. I think a good place to start is busting some of those myths about the earliest religious practices. So what would you say is like the biggest misconception people have about early humans and religion?
Well, I think a lot of people just assume that religion has always been a part of the human experience.
Right.
But the evidence suggests something else entirely. It really suggests something quite different.
Hmm.
We don't actually see good, solid evidence of religious activity before the Middle Paleolithic period, which started around 100,000 years ago.
Okay.
Before that, early hominids like Australopithecus,
Mm-hmm.
Homo habilis,
Yeah.
even Homo erectus, they just didn't have the cognitive complexity for the kind of abstract thought and symbolic systems that you really need for religion.
Mm. So their brains were kind of just wired for survival,
Yeah.
not symbolism.
Right.
So what about that idea? You always see it like these early humans were incredible hunters taking down these giant beasts. Did that have anything to do with early religious beliefs?
Well, that's a good question. I think a lot of people are really drawn to that image, this
Yeah.
mighty hunter, taking down a mammoth.
Right.
But in fact, it seems more likely that those early humans were probably more like scavengers. They would use tools to get to the marrow from bones that were left behind by bigger predators.
Hmm.
And even Homo erectus, who did make, relatively advanced tools, their technology basically stayed the same for nearly 1 million years.
Wow.
So that suggests to me that their minds weren't really creating those complex belief systems yet.
Okay, so no elaborate hunting rituals or animal worship or anything like that going on.
No, doesn't look like it.
Okay. What about Neanderthals? They seem to have been a lot more advanced.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence they were engaging in religious practices?
Well, Neanderthals, they were our close evolutionary cousins. They definitely were a leap forward in terms of intelligence. They were skilled hunters. They had complex social structures. And they even seem to have cared for their sick and injured.
Yeah.
So definitely some advanced behaviors there.
Yeah.
But even with Neanderthals, the evidence for specific rituals is pretty scarce. And there's actually a lot of debate about just how much their different cognitive abilities were interacting with each other.
It seems like every time we think we've got some evidence of early religious practices, there's always another explanation.
Right.
What about those cave bear cults? I've always found those fascinating.
Oh, yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, all those heaps of bare bones in those caves. Surely that points to some kind of ritual, right?
Well, yeah, at first glance, it does seem that way. But, a lot of those caves were natural bear habitats.
Right.
So what may look like a carefully arranged collection of skulls might just be, bears living and dying in those caves over many, many generations.
So just bears being bears.
Yeah,
Not so mystical after all.
not so mystical.
What about skull worship? Weren't there some findings of Neanderthal skulls that suggested some sort of ritualistic behavior?
Yeah, there have been some isolated skulls found. But, natural processors or scavengers could have easily moved those skulls around.
Mm.
So to really say that something is ritualistic, you need to see a really clear pattern.
Yeah.
Something that goes beyond random chance.
So just finding a skull in a cave doesn't mean it was placed there as part of a ritual.
Right.
Okay. What about cannibalism?
Ooh.
Surely that's got to be a sign of some dark religious practice.
Well, cannibalism, it definitely captures the imagination. But we really have to be careful not to jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
Attributing it to ritual relies heavily on comparing it to much later cultural practices. And it often misinterprets the archaeological evidence. Even when we find human bones that have been butchered, it could be a case of survival cannibalism,
Oh, right.
not ritualistic.
Desperate times.
Exactly. And there's really no indication of any kind of ceremonies associated with it.
Okay, so is there anything from this early period that actually does point towards religious feeling?
There is one thing that really stands out,
Mm.
the emergence of intentional burials in the Middle Paleolithic.
Okay.
It seems like a really simple thing, but it's actually a huge step.
So what makes these burials different from just like a body being left where it died?
Well, these burials show signs of being deliberate. Sometimes the bodies are arranged in specific positions, or they are found with tools or other objects.
Hmm.
So it suggests that they believed that something of the person continued on after death.
Wow.
Or at the very least, it shows a reluctance to fully abandon their loved ones.
Yeah, it is. It's very moving when you think about it. Like
Yeah,
there was a sense of something beyond just the physical.
exactly. And even though these early burials were pretty simple, no elaborate rituals or anything, it's still a huge leap forward in terms of abstract thinking.
Yeah.
It hints at the emergence of ideas about an afterlife or maybe a spirit world.
So while that caveman worshiping fire might be a myth,
Right.
the image of them carefully burying their dead kind of paints a whole new picture.
Yeah.
One that suggests something really profound is starting to stir in the human mind. And this is where it starts to get really interesting, right? This idea of the afterlife, of something beyond this world.
Yeah,
It seems like that's a thread that runs through so many religions even today.
it is. It's a fascinating thread to follow. And speaking of threads, let's move on to the Mesolithic period, where these early burial practices begin to evolve and offer even more clues about the development of religious thought.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we've moved from scavenging for scraps to laying our loved ones to rest with care. What happens next in our story of early religion?
It's really interesting. We see the emergence of more elaborate religious practices, and it seems to happen right around the same time as some pretty big changes in human societies. This is during the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods.
Okay.
We're talking about that transition from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle
Mhm.
to a more settled way of life.
So instead of chasing after their food, they're starting to plant it and raise it themselves.
Right. Agriculture.
Agriculture. Okay.
And that shift to agriculture had these ripple effects throughout their social structures. So instead of small nomadic groups, they could form larger, more complex communities all in one place, which means they had to figure out new ways to organize themselves
Mm-hmm.
and maintain, some social cohesion.
Right.
And guess what played a big role in that?
Let me guess.
Religion.
You got it. Religion offered this framework for explaining the world, from natural phenomena to social norms. It provided a sense of shared identity, purpose, and belonging. And that was crucial when you've got all these people living and working together for the first time.
So religion became like this social glue holding these
Yeah.
growing communities together.
Exactly.
What about those burials? Did they change too now that people were settling down?
They did. During the Mesolithic, we see more consistent use of grave goods. People were buried with tools, ornaments, even food. It suggests their ideas about the afterlife were becoming more detailed. It's
Interesting.
not just a shadowy place anymore.
Right.
Now it's a place where you might need your favorite axe.
Or a nice necklace.
Yeah, you gotta look good in the afterlife.
Right. It makes you wonder what they thought the afterlife was like, what they envisioned for themselves after death.
Yeah. What about in the Neolithic? Did things change again?
Oh, yeah. In the Neolithic, things get really interesting. Agriculture is booming. People are living in permanent settlements. And we start to see these large communal tombs, often built out of stone.
Wow.
I mean, these were major undertakings. Clearly, these structures were important to them, both practically and symbolically.
It's like they were investing more in the afterlife,
Right.
creating these lasting monuments for their dead.
Yeah.
Were there any other signs that religion was becoming a more central part of life in the Neolithic?
Absolutely. The most obvious is monumental architecture. Think Stonehenge.
Right.
These massive structures required a level of social organization and shared belief that just wasn't there before. Can you imagine trying to coordinate a project like Stonehenge without any written language or modern tools?
No.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it really shows how powerful those shared beliefs can be.
It does.
That they could bring people together to achieve something on that scale. But did everyone believe the same things? I mean, even today, there's so many different interpretations of religion.
Oh, that's such an important point. Just because we see these large-scale projects, it doesn't mean everyone believed in the same gods or followed the same rituals. There was likely a lot of diversity. even within relatively small geographic areas.
Hmm.
We have to be careful not to impose our own modern ideas about religion onto the past.
Right.
Archaeology gives us glimpses, but there's always going to be an element of mystery
Yeah.
and interpretation.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle where half the pieces are missing.
Exact.
But even with those missing pieces, we can still kind of get a sense of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And what does that bigger picture tell us about how religion was developing in these later periods?
Well, I think we really have to consider the impact of agriculture. This shift from being at the mercy of nature to actively trying to control it, to make it work for them.
Right.
That must have had a huge impact on their beliefs.
Yeah, it makes sense. If your survival depends on, the success of your crops, you'd be pretty concerned about the forces that, control the rain and the sunshine.
Absolutely. And that's what we see. Deities associated with fertility, the seasons, the cycle of life and death, things directly connected to agriculture.
So they start to see those forces as deities.
Exactly. But it's not just about the practical. The agricultural cycle itself, that planting, growth, harvest, death, it became this powerful metaphor for human existence.
It's almost poetic, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're connecting the dots between the natural world and their own lives. They're
Yeah.
finding meaning in those rhythms of the seasons.
Exactly.
Were there other ways that they were expressing these deeper ideas besides these grand tombs and monuments?
This is where the emergence of more complex art forms in the Neolithic gets really exciting. We're not just talking about cave paintings anymore.
Okay.
We see carvings, sculptures, often with abstract designs or stylized representations of humans and animals.
So it's less about recreating what they see and more about expressing something deeper.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
they were creating a visual language to express ideas, beliefs, maybe even to tell stories
Hmm.
or communicate with the divine.
Wow.
Think about it. It's a huge step in the development of religious thought.
Yeah, it's almost like they're laying the groundwork for the written word.
Yeah.
They're finding ways to communicate more abstract ideas, which would be crucial for developing organized religion later on.
That's a great insight. And this visual language with its symbols and metaphors helps solidify those shared beliefs.
Right.
And that's essential when you have these larger, more complex societies.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see how from simple burials to intricate art, religion is woven into every aspect of life in the Neolithic. It's like a thread that connects their practical concerns about survival with their deepest questions about life, death, and the universe.
And that thread is what makes this whole exploration so captivating. It shows that the desire to connect with something larger than ourselves, to find meaning in the face of the unknown, it's just a fundamental part of what makes us human.
It really is.
And it's a story that's been unfolding for tens of thousands of years. So where does that story go next? What happens when those threads of belief start to be woven into more formal, organized systems? We've made it. From simple graves to elaborate tombs, from like the first hints of an afterlife to, a whole visual language for those really complex beliefs. It feels like we're kind of on the cusp of something big here.
Yeah, we are.
So where do we go next in this whole story of early religion? Well, this is where we start to see those early forms of religious expression. Those threads of belief
Right.
start to get woven into more formalized systems. So as societies become even more complex, with hierarchies and specialized roles and things like that, their religious practices also got a lot more complex.
So we're talking about the rise of organized religion here
Yeah.
with priests and temples and maybe even the first holy books.
Exactly. Think about it. Those large-scale societies, they need ways to maintain order.
Yeah.
They need to be able to resolve disputes. They need to transmit knowledge from one generation to the next.
Yeah.
And religion kind of steps in to fill that role. That's when we start to see priesthoods emerge.
Right.
Individuals who acted as intermediaries between humans and the divine.
So the OG religious leaders
Yeah,
shaping those early doctrines and rituals.
exactly.
It's pretty amazing how those patterns just emerge again and again throughout history.
Yeah, it really is. And then there's another huge development, the invention of writing.
That's a total game changer, not just for religion, but for everything.
For everything.
Now, those sacred texts and myths and laws, they could be recorded and preserved,
Yeah.
which leads to a lot more standardization and continuity in religious beliefs.
It's like going from oral storytelling to having a whole library full of ancient wisdom.
Exactly.
You can
Yeah.
pass those beliefs down with a lot more accuracy
Yeah.
and consistency.
And that standardization was crucial for the growth of those large-scale organized religions.
Right.
The ones that would go on to dominate the landscape, like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. They developed these really elaborate theological frameworks, ethical codes, and social institutions, and they've impacted billions of people over centuries.
It's pretty humbling to think about, the impact that these religions have had on human history. They've
Well,
shaped everything: art, literature, philosophy, weirs, even political systems.
everything.
It makes you realize that these seemingly abstract ideas, they can have really powerful
They
consequences.
can. And it all goes back to that fundamental human need to find meaning and purpose, to connect with something larger than ourselves. It's a need that has driven us to create some really incredible things, both beautiful and terrible.
But it's not just about these big organized religions, right?
Right.
Weren't there like smaller, more localized beliefs and practices going on alongside those larger systems?
Oh, of course, there's always religious diversity.
Yeah.
Even within those large organized religions, you have, different sects and denominations, each with its own interpretations and practices.
Right.
And then alongside those, you have countless smaller scale belief systems tied to specific communities or regions or ethnic groups.
So it's not like everyone just abandoned their old traditions and beliefs
Right.
as these larger religions spread. It was more like a blending, a mixing of ideas and practices.
Yes, exactly. It's a dynamic process. And I think it reminds us that religion isn't this monolithic thing. It's constantly evolving and adapting, interacting with other cultural forces. It reflects the diversity of human experience.
This has been an incredible journey.
Yeah, has.
We've covered so much ground.
We have.
From those very first tentative steps towards religious thought
Yeah.
to the rise of these complex organized systems.
It's amazing.
But before we wrap things up, I can't help but wonder, what does all of this tell us about the future of religion?
Ah, the million-dollar question.
Right.
Well, nobody can predict the future,
Right.
but one thing is certain.
Mm.
Religion is not going away. That deep-seated human need for meaning, for purpose, for connection, it's as strong as ever. What form that need will take in the future? Well, who knows? But I think we'll continue to see both continuity and change.
Mm.
Innovation alongside tradition.
So maybe we'll see new religions emerge and older ones adapt to new realities and challenges.
Okay.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities.
It really is. And remember, this deep dive is just the beginning of your exploration. There's a whole universe of fascinating research and scholarship out there just waiting to be discovered. Keep asking those big questions. Keep searching for those connections. Keep exploring the rich tapestry of human belief and experience.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks.
And I think that's a perfect note to end on to all our listeners. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, and we hope it's given you a new appreciation for that long and winding road that led to the religions we know today.
Yeah.
Remember, the search for meaning, it's an ongoing journey, and we're all a part of that story.